Hi everyone, George here, the editor of the Sales Transformation Podcast. Just chiming in to let you know that this week's episode is the first of two parts. Phil sat down with Jonathan Scripps for our Mastercast series, discussing his master's research into neurodiversity. It's a topic that's both fascinating and important, so it's no surprise that it ended up being a pretty long conversation. Therefore, we've decided to split this one in two, so don't be alarmed at the end of this one, and make sure you tune in next week for the second part. For now though, please enjoy part one of this Mastercast episode with Jonathan Scripps.
Well, I just want to say a massive welcome to Jonathan to join us on this next episode of the Masters series within the Sales Transformation podcast series that we've got. And for those listeners who don't know the significance of the Masters series, what we do here is we invite certain of our students who've been through the Masters program to share with us the insights that they've gained from the final thesis stroke research project that they did, which has enabled them to qualify with the Masters in Leading Sales Transformation. And typically we choose those who have come through the process with extremely high scores. And I can say that Jonathan is one of the brightest students we've had who've gone through the process and come out the other end with a master's. But without going into the topic in too much detail, perhaps we could ask Jonathan just to say a few words by means of introduction. And it's super to have you with us, Jonathan.
Thank you for inviting me. No, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. So yeah, about me really. I started my sort of sales journey in my early 20s, and I joined a company quite early on called Speedy Hire. So basically, they were a hire company within the construction industry. So that was my first sort of introduction into the sort of construction world. And as the years went on, I was had promoted. I was promoted to sort of account management, regional account, major accounts, etc., and then eventually to business development director. That's when my sort of journey did over the sort of 18-year period. But during that, I started my level 7 apprenticeships with yourself, with Consalia, and that's when it really clicked for me. My journey really about sort of sales leadership and transformation, because not only I learned obviously a lot more about leadership, I learned a lot about myself as well. And that kind of was the sort of groundings and the footings to where my MSc and my research led.
Yeah. No, it is quite an incredible story. And just for the benefit of the, again, for the listeners, the topic of Jonathan's final project is neurodiversity, learning and performance in construction. But the overall title of the dissertation is Unlocking Hidden Talent. As we know, as well as some of the listeners will know, is the Masters itself is structured around a number of different modules and covering all sorts of different topics. And the final module or the final project picks up on a particular interest that any one of our students have developed. And Jonathan was sharing with me just before we've started to press record, what was the key that unlocked this particular interest. So Jonathan, I wonder if you could just talk us through where did the idea of this particular topic surface and why did it surface?
Absolutely. Now, while I was at Speedy and now at Pro Rail Services, I did a lot of work within various sort of large infrastructure projects, one being AMP8, which is the major sort of 5-year investment plan within the water sector. And one of the biggest things that they were screaming out was they're worried that they didn't have enough people or didn't have enough skilled workers within that sort of talent pool to actually use to deliver the projects which the government had set out. And it was a big problem, and it still is. It's a big, so for example, research, it was 48,000 additional workers per year are needed and required in just that industry for the plans to happen, for the government plans to actually happen. And that's a lot, as a real lot of people. So lots of recruitment, lots of people, lots of jobs, lots of opportunities available. But my sort of real theory is, why are we not looking inside the business? There's a lot of talented people. Why are we having to go to recruit? Why are we going to have to do various different things? And then during the sort of process within the apprenticeship, the level 7 apprenticeship, I found out that I had ADHD. And for me, I was looking at various different sort of traits that had potentially locked me into sort of moving my career on as well, where little things where, when it comes to sort of processing information, learning patterns, etc., where I had struggled in the past and not realized it. And if it hadn't been for a particular module and a particular sort of session on coaching that we had with yourselves, Phil, I probably would never have known, because it got me to ask the right questions, and it asked me about myself and about leadership and about how to coach people the right way, asking the right questions, the what questions, like the grow model. So where that led me on to really is someone actually said to me, and one of the colleagues said, I mentioned the word imposter syndrome, because I was, because we talk about mindsets, and something that you're very, very good at as well. So we talked about the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. And before I started this journey, I thought I knew I had a fixed mindset, because I thought, for me to do an MSc, I can't do that. I'm not going to be able to do that, etc., etc. I can't pass this exam. I expected to come in and be on these big sort of seminars and halls and, learn and listen and read and write 1,000 times. But then I knew I couldn't do that, because I struggled to do that. That was just the way my mind didn't process the information. So during that time, as I say, I looked at neurodiversity, and I looked at various different traits that I was having, where a lot of them are very similar. For example, just a real quick example is, I can hyperfocus, but I can walk into a room and not know where my keys are, for example. Or I can do things like forget things very, very quickly. But when it comes to putting me in a room, let me focusing, I can really, really focus on that. So where I felt, where's this holding back? So I looked at neurodiversity, and I looked around how many people are actually classed as neurodivergent. So that could be a number of things. It could be ADHD, it could be dyslexia, it could be autism, dyspraxia, Tourette's, etc., etc. So there's about 11 key traits. So, and it's a big corner, it's a big umbrella. And from that, I thought, well, I wonder how many people within the construction industry have this same problem, this same learning issue when it came to development. How many people were holding themselves back? How many people couldn't pass those particular exams to get them to that sort of next level, so they could be the next leader, the next project director, etc., etc. And how many of them are holding them back? Not because they can't do the job. It's just the fact that they have to pass a certain criteria and a certain skill set to get them from, say, that kind of on-site to that sort of project leader. Because construction is very, as you say, safety led, very critical. It's very planning. It's very risk, etc., etc. So, and I looked really into it. I said, well, there is a lot of talent out there. How many of those people that sit at that sort of level, when I say level, that sort of, part of their career, wanting to that next step to take some of these jobs that are available, that people are screaming out for, but haven't put themselves forward because they've held themselves back because of learning alignment, because the way that they're taught and the way that they've learned is not designed for the way that their brain thinks or processes information. So that kind of sort of started the real theme, is why are we not looking at this 15 to 20% population within the construction industry? And surely there's people that are hidden. I say unlocking hidden talent within neurodiversity learning performance, because we could actually have an opportunity there to actually really focus on people that we can develop within, that are, as I said, I know, literally that are holding themselves back, who want to push forward. So that was the tie-up, really, the long-winded version.
It's a really amazing story, and it's so interesting that whilst you were on that coaching module, which is arguably enabling you to coach other people, you found yourself probably coaching yourself in that process.
I did, and
through
I did.
the skill, I guess, of the facilitators in some of the role plays, the fishbowl
Yeah,
activities. You began
and it was
to,
great.
sort of unlock that idea of thinking. I'm interested in this imposter syndrome that you mentioned earlier, because I
Yeah,
recollect, if I'm not mistaken, in the very first module, when we talk about concerns, I seem to remember you using that word, perhaps in that
yeah,
very first module when
you're right.
we do the we do that personal shield, and
Yeah,
we have
you're
those.
spot on.
Is that correct, Jonathan? Because
Correct.
I seem to remember some sort of conversation that we had at the time, and it was a kind of almost wanting to legitimize the knowledge that you had around a qualification,
Mm.
and the reason why you went on the journey.
That's spot on, Phil, and also as a leader as well,
Yeah,
as a sales leader, because my initial sort of module one was around that, and it was all about, I was worried that I was too nice to be a leader. Now, basically the journey was I was replaced by someone, because I wasn't that kind of like, I was more of a, empathetic leader. I wanted to,
yeah,
a lot more kind of like that side, what the firm at the time wanted was someone that would come in there and be a bit more sort of, get it done, get it this, get it that. And that didn't work for me. And I was worried that people were, because I was nice and I was kind of empathetic, I was worried that people would take advantage. And then how I was thinking, it was going through that sort of mindset going, I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'll never be an MD. I'll never do this. I'm too sensitive. And all this sort of doubt came in. And what was really, really nice is when we did that, that sort of exercise, some of the senior people in my life had seen within my coaching and my mentoring and whatever in my management had seen things in me that I'd never seen in myself.
right.
Things like, attention to detail and things like that, and professionalism, and all these lovely words that I'm thinking, do people really see me like that? But me, I didn't have that sort of self-confidence. I just thought I'm just a nice guy that's done well because he's, good at account management, because I like people, like talking to people, like, that whole sort of good stuff that you need to be in the sales world. So, but it was that kind of, am I going to be a good leader of people, or am I too nice or kind or sensitive? So that was where it came. So that was where the sort of self-doubt really came from. And it took a good while to learn based on some of the exercises we did to realize actually it's not about that. There's more to life than having to be this sort of bullshit sales director.
Well, it's interesting. I think there are sort of stereotypes that one has in mind about about salespeople as well as sales leaders, and I think having seen so many brilliant people go through the master's program, you do see such a variety. You see people at all ends of the spectrum. But I think one of the most important things that that we address on the master's program is the sort of grounding of any kind of leadership comes from a deep understanding of who you are as a person, and from that you can then build. And I think you're a great exemplar of that. But to actually suddenly realize, so when it surfaced on module 3 that you might be neurodivergent in some way, how did you get that sort of diagnosis? Did you have a doctor talk to you, or how
Yeah, so basically I thought it was a case of sort of mental health, anxiety,
right,
self-confidence.
yeah,
That was the line that it went down. I did struggle a little bit about, and I thought it was down to that. I thought it was that. But when you look at ADHD, and something I'll talk about again, there's a thing linked with ADHD called RSD, which is a rejection sensitivity dysphoria, which is very similar. But I'll explain that in a second. But answering your question is, what I was doing in particular in that, and probably even the module before, I was finding myself very much. I remember a question that I think I asked yourself or Andrew at the time. I struggle to articulate things because it's in my brain. I want to say it. I'm desperate to say it. I want to get it out before I forget it, and then it just comes out as not like it, to me. It just comes out of a big mishmash of what I was trying to say, and I'm probably doing it a bit now, to be fair. But that's just part of one of the conditions, really. But what I find is, and I think I remember having a conversation, is how do I become more articulate? Because I was worried that, was it an intelligence thing? Was it this? Was it that? Do I need to read more, etc.? Do I need to do more studies of world-class speakers, etc.? Because I just literally, I didn't know about that. The ADHD had these effects in it. Like I said, it's about regulating that kind of thought process. But yeah, the good thing is now I know more and I've learned more. There are more things that I can do within myself that can help me, like take your time, etc., and all the good things that we would have learned. But so basically, I remember driving home that night going, oh, I need to look into this, and I was actually listening to podcasts and books, and I always knew about it. I always knew it. I knew friends that had it, but growing up, sort of in the sort of 80s and 90s, ADHD was, you were the naughty child in the corner if you had ADHD. And that's all people knew. That's what people knew, and they didn't understand. It's nobody's fault. It's just that, to be honest, it didn't really. The whole neurodiversity thing didn't really happen until it was coined by a lady called Judy Singer. And she's known as and one of the people I talk about, she's like the grandmother of neurodiversity.
Right.
And she was all about the differences of they're a natural part of human diversity. It's not one or the other. It's the it's joined up that way. But that's only 26 years ago when we think about it. That's no time at all when people have been had these issues. Don't call them issues, but this other way of thinking, and that's the way forward. But so naturally, I just went through the process. Went to the doctors, the usual thing. There's a 2.5 year waiting list. So I basically decided to do it and learn about it. But as I was studying it, and learning more about it, I was thinking, I do that. So you have to go through a doctor and a psychiatrist, etc., and do an official assessment before they say you've got it.
No, it's an amazing story, and I'd like to come back to the topic of different ways of learning, a bit later on, or it may get covered as we talk about it. But Jonathan, that's been very helpful for you to kind of share the background to the story, and I think there's going to be an awful lot of listeners who can be very interested in the journey that you've been on. And actually, within your paper, and we don't have chance to really share this, you have a very useful glossary of terms, which I think was a very clever thing to do at the beginning, because it helps those who may not be so close to the topic start to look at some of the language that's being used as you describe it. And the umbrella that you described earlier on, again, I had no idea until I read your document that there were 11 different types of neurodiversity, as we look at it today. And you've also cited earlier on, you've mentioned it already, the challenges that are facing the work base within the construction sector. And so you're starting to bring together an industry problem with something that's close to your heart as well, with these topics. So your study was guided by 3 research questions. How is neurodiversity currently understood within the UK construction industry? What challenges do neurodivergent individuals face within learning and the workplace environment? And then what practical changes are required to support neurodivergent individuals? So 3 great questions. So perhaps we could sort of move on to having determined the research questions, and perhaps this was influenced before the questions were determined, but what sort of reading did you do around the topic, which maybe influenced the direction of your final research?
The main reading around it, a lot of it was mainly sort of article doctor led. It was mainly a lot of the work was what has been discovered so far. So when I was doing the literature review, I wanted to know what the pattern was, where we're at, for example, when it started, where we're at with it, and the different ways that people have introduced different ways of thinking. I found someone like a chap called Dr. Michael Oliver quite interesting, because he developed the social model of disability. So what he basically said is it's not the individual, but it's the system of the actual, it's the systems, it's the environment, the barriers that are often created. They're created by the systems and not the individual. Because a lot of people will look at so for example, if there is an issue when it comes to learning and development, a lot of people go look at that person rather than the actual, the environment around them. And that was really, really interesting. That kind of sort of led on from, where we was learning about that. And then something very interesting to say is a lady called Professor Amy Edmondson, and she wrote originally around psychological safety. And what I learned a lot about them is how important this is one of the topics that has sort of one of my highlights as number one. And we mentioned it before around psychological safety is learning and development. Without that, even in general in life, if a manager or a company doesn't give you that feeling of psychological safety, forget it, because you won't speak up, you won't ask the questions if you don't feel you're ready. So if you're in a classroom, even going back to a child, this is something that I imagined. If you're say you're entering a class and you're learning a subject, even as a child, that child might not feel safe enough to go, oh, sorry, I don't understand that. Because again, I'd be afraid to be laughed at by the children or patronized. Yeah. And that lives on in adult life as well, I think. It still does. And I think having that sort of and this is what Amy Emerson was saying, is to the foundation of learning, and it is so important to have that, to create those high functional and high sort of high teams, because had I not been able to ask the questions, I would have never have known, and I wouldn't have been able to learn. So respect to your colleagues really for adopting that, because that is how a learning environment when it comes to development needs to be, but not just in learning, in everything, because that will keep you. Yeah. So I did a lot of research and learning about, and when I did my actual interviews, so you mentioned, as I say, I did a survey, and I did a survey out more about how a company understands neurodiversity within their workplace. Do they really know about it, or have they just seen it in a nice flyer? And I mean that in the nicest possible way. We've heard of it, but do we really know what it means? And that was the biggest thing, because I found a lot of people, oh yeah, I know what that is. Do you know what that is? You know what I mean? And it's people, let's just say, like you said before, people have heard of it. People have heard of ADHD, autism, dyslexia. But what does it mean? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for your company? What does it mean for your staff, your employees, etc., etc.? So I did a big survey, and some of the facts that came back, there was I think about 50 people came back to me, which was incredible. And these were people from CEO level all the way down to sort of, any level, basically. And it was a real mix of people as well. I wanted to know what leaders did, but I also wanted to know what people like from HR. I wanted to know people from operations, etc., within the construction industry. And one of the questions really, really, really interested me, and this is the first point, how much do we actually know about it, and how much are we aware of it? And if they honestly want to come and put their hand on their heart, a lot of them said, I don't really know, John. I don't know a lot about it. I don't. And when you looked at it, so many people, a lot of the scores were very, very low when it came to people's knowledge around the actual subject. And one of the big things is, would you know how to handle someone or handle a situation who had this particular neurodivergent? What would you do? And everybody pointed out it would be an HR matter. It's an HR matter. For me, it's not an HR matter. So what I've learned from my findings, it's a management. It's a leadership. you can't just, this is not something you can just go, go to HR, because it's more than that. And that's something that where a lot of leaders did feel it was more down to sort of that kind of HR route than it actually was their own personal leadership. So it opened up a few people's eyes, really, where, and a lot of people were quite shocked at the results of how little people knew, and actually how little people would know what to do in a situation, or how to manage or get the best out of their colleagues that were neurodivergent. So that was really, really interesting. But starting from the point one, and this is about Professor Amy Edson, her psychological safety was huge.
Yeah.
As she sort of went on, and something which I found really, really interesting. This was probably the best thing I ever did, and I could not believe it. So once I was ready to go, and I was ready to do my subject, and this really, really did overwhelm me. I put something on LinkedIn and said, "This is what I'm doing. I'm doing this dissertation for my MSc. This is my subject. This is what I want to do." Put it out there, lots of different hashtags, thinking, I might get 1, 2, 3 people get back, couple of likes like that. I must about 300 people contact me.
Wow.
And which was incredible.
Yeah.
I had literally, and I look at that still every single day, because once you put it out there, and I don't know what it is, more and more people in the world, and they're not just saying in the UK, they know lots about it. They want to talk about it. And it's almost like it's, once you start researching it, it's amazing what comes out of the woodwork. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember it was, and I looked at it, and so cut long story short, lots and lots of people contacted me and said I didn't have the time to talk to everyone, but I thanked them all kindly. And from that, I kept in touch with a good 10 of them. And we're still in touch today, which was lovely, because they're helping me develop my next chapter of, from what I've learned from the masters. So they were really, really influential, really, because they were people of autistic, they were leaders, they were people in compliance, etc., governance. I had people in Australia, I had people in Thailand, I had people in America, I had people that were represented neurodiverse people within corporate law. Wow. Incredible. And it was like, wow. So remember, as I say, I had 3 months to do all this sort of research. As I gave along, I was introduced to people like and Dr. Nancy Doyle. And Dr. Nancy Doyle, but she's a publisher and world famous doctor within neurodiversity. And as I was doing my previous module before the masters, the strategic business proposal, I brought her book and I read her book. So I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to take a punt here and contact her. And she came straight back to me. John, I love what you're doing. But do you know what was really nice? She actually said, she gave me some advice. Be careful. When you put it out there, people are going to be quite defensive. People are going to be, want to try and debate it with you, etc. But make sure when you look at everybody's different. And that's the biggest advice she said to me. If it, when it came to if you're male, you're female, you're young, you're old, what religion, it affects everybody differently. So you can't just go, that's one thing, that's neuro, that's autism, that's that. It affects every single person differently. So my ADHD might be different from my colleagues. Yeah, it could be complete. And that's where these people have spent the last 20, 30, even 40 years studying this. So what was the best thing about that? Was probably that real learned life experience, reading people's papers, reading people's, people were even sending me their doctorates and their masters and their books, and just like, have a look at that, have a crack at that. And then we were talking about them afterwards. So the learning really started to say, so I did the survey side of things to get me an idea of how much the industry actually knew about it. But the real information came from the interviews. And I thought that was probably the best, what I enjoyed the most, learning from real people, learning from people experienced.
Yeah.
I've got one particular story. I interviewed this chap with autism. He has 2 or 3 masters, if you can get that. I didn't even know you could, in various different things. autistic, struggles, works for Oxford University, but he can't get a job. And then he's really struggling to get a job. So I'm like, well, why? So he sent me his papers, etc. And I'm like, this is incredible. This is amazing. But what I found fascinating is he said one thing to me, and this is one thing that I'll always take away, and I still learn it. He needs to be shown how to do something rather than told how to do something. So, for example, one of the biggest things, and what I really reflected and did some writing on it afterwards, it was the don't tell me, show me, because that's how his brain works. You have, and that's what I loved. Going back to sort of our sessions and our workshops, and is with the master's journey, is we did that practical demonstration. We did that inclusion. We did that involved because, and I'll be completely honest with you, if you and your colleagues or any of the people that I learned along the way just spoke to me and told me to write it all down, and I think who was it? I think Mark, Dr. Mark, he said to me, he said, yeah, I completely get what you're saying, because the whole talk and chalk thing just doesn't work for but there's timing, there's limits, there's as much information you've got to get, and a lot of learning is like that. But that's where one of my other pillars came into, about learning alignment. So what also this autistic man said to me is, he taught me how to talk to him. And he said, talk to me in the same rhythm as your heartbeat. So I had to do this, and I had to talk to him literally like that. And he got it, completely understood it. And that's how he processed the information and understood it, to go off and do what he needed to do. But he can't get a job. But what he does do, which really fascinated me, he was writing for Oxford University. He was writing job descriptions to actually suit the job rather than the qualification of the job. And that was really helping people, because what he was saying is that 80% of things on the job description you will never do. And this is where learning alignment came into it. Why we're learning for a career, we're learning for a job, we're learning to do things which 80% of the stuff we'll never do. And that was where he sort of redesigned and restructured this way of getting the best people in, because he wanted the people that could actually do the job rather than what looks good on paper. And I found that fascinating, but it took his way of thinking and his brain to produce that. And I believe that was one of his, biggest skill sets. So he could actually understood the role, what was required of the role, and what they needed from that individual. So it's things like that I just found absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So just to help my understanding on that, then he was at Oxford University. Is that right?
No, he worked at Oxford University.
He worked at Oxford University, trying to help students. Was it?
It was actually he was actually helping the actual administration, the administration to bring in people to work in the university.
Okay, not to study, but to work at the university.
Work within the university. Oh. But what they were finding is the particular job descriptions were not matching of actually what they needed to do for the job.
Okay, so they were getting a problem that people, yes, they may have passed the interview in terms of the job description, but when they turn up, they weren't able to do the job because they approached the job descriptions in the wrong way.
So it was really interesting, and that's when he said, show them how to do it, don't tell them.
Don't tell me.
Which was really interesting.
It is.
I found it fascinating, to be honest. I really did.
But actually, coming back to your research, I mean, it's the 300 responses you got, and then the 10 or 15 that you've kept in close contact with them wanting to share their research and papers. I mean, I can see you had so much information.
Yeah,
I were able to process. I mean, how you put it into your final thesis, I don't know, but you must have had so much.
I did, and it was fantastic, overwhelming. I was actually really overwhelmed by people's generosity for their time, their passion, their time, even like talking to people with time difference in different countries, which is really interesting because I thought, well, do you know what? Yes, we're in the UK, but let's hear other people's points of view. Is it different in other countries? Are people better at it than other countries, etc.? I didn't just want to learn about what it was like in construction. And I think what was really important, there are some very good companies, and one company, SAP, who, as I say, we've got some wonderful friends and colleagues from there.
Yeah.
They're really good at it. They're really good. So what we found is like tech companies, consultancy companies happen to sort of really be up there and advanced when it comes to actually understanding and educating and building that kind of framework to help support neurodiverse people. And I think that's fantastic. A lot of businesses are still catching up, construction being one of them, but there are companies that can do it. So it's proven it can be done with time, research and investment. But and SAP are one of them. And one of my colleagues on the cohort, Michael, he was like, you need to speak to this guy. Okay, I'll speak to this guy. And next thing you know, I'm having a conversation and which was lovely because even my colleagues on the cohort were engaging. We're all engaging with each other. And that's one of the beauties of it, I think, is we all helped each other as well.
Yeah.
And when it came to sort of our own research for the masters.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was really interesting, that sort of couple of months of meeting, learning, researching and collecting.
Yeah. Sorry, Jonathan, to interrupt.
Yeah, please.
But I just want to come back to a figure I think you mentioned earlier on, which is like 20%. Was it 20% of the workforce has some form of neurodiversity sort of challenge? Is that, am I correct in saying that?
You are, yeah. So depending on, again, this is when it gets, so statistically, you can say it's between 15 and 20% of what we know about.
Right.
So there's probably another potential 10, 15% that aren't even diagnosed. So that's the thing is, so there are things that can help people that don't realize it yet. And that's where some of my research had. But yeah, you're looking about 15 to 20% of the population of the world is neurodivergent.
Wow.
Hi everyone, George here again. Just to say I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this Mastercast with Jonathan Scripps, and to remind you to come back next week to hear the rest. See you then.